The Atlantic didn't shake when U-204 died. No explosion lit the sky. No survivors surfaced. Just 7 seconds, and an entire weapon system whispered its arrival. That night, something impossible happened. A U-boat, charged, armed, diving fast, was erased without firing a single shot. No counterattack, no second run, just 6 silent hits, and the ocean closed like nothing had happened. But the shockwaves didn't rise from the water. They traveled through command rooms, from Gibraltar to London, where officers stared at a single line of text that felt unreal. Hedgehog fired. 6 confirmed hits. Target destroyed instantly. No one understood it yet, but those 7 seconds had just changed the entire battle of the Atlantic, because for the first time in the war, the hunters had become the hunted. After U-204 vanished beneath the surface, a quiet shock rolled across the Atlantic War. Not a loud announcement, not a triumphant broadcast, nothing newspapers could print. It was the kind of shift that only men at sea and men who commanded wars could feel. High above Gibraltar, HMS Deptford carried the smell of fuel and victory. Every escort within convoy HG-74 suddenly felt taller, as if the weight on their shoulders had lifted for the first time in years. But the true impact of that 7-second kill was far greater than any man aboard the sloop yet understood. Months earlier in Fairley, the weapon had only been a rumor of hope. Engineers spoke about it quietly, almost nervously. Officers wondered if it would work at all. And now it was real. It was deadly, and the sea itself had carried the proof. By the time Deptford rejoined the convoy screen, signals were racing across naval commands. From Gibraltar to Londonderry to the Admiralty map room in London, officers leaned over teleprinters reading the same short, unbelievable message. Contact maintained. Hedgehog fired. 6 confirmed hits. Target destroyed instantly. No counterattack, no second pass, no wasted depth charges. A weapon designed in desperation had just changed the realities of submarine warfare. Within hours, escort captains across the western approaches were awake in their cabins, rubbing tired eyes and whispering the same words to themselves. It works. It works. In real water. It works against a moving U-boat. Hope, which had once been an expensive luxury in 1941, suddenly became something almost practical, something commanders could trust, something that might save thousands of lives. Out at sea, the convoy pushed through the long Atlantic swell with a new sense of purpose. Deptford's exhausted crew felt a strange lightness. Something in the ship's timbers felt different, as if the hull itself had grown a spine overnight. Sailors walked across the deck with a quiet pride, the kind men at war rarely allow themselves. They knew what had happened. They knew what it meant. They knew what the Hedgehog could now do for every convoy trying to reach the British Isles alive. Far beneath the waves, a different emotion was spreading, colder, heavier, and infinitely more dangerous. Across the Bay of Biscay and into the U-boat pens of Lorient and Saint-Nazaire, young submariners listened to returning crews speak in uneasy tones. They whispered about escorts that no longer charged blindly overhead, escorts that no longer lost sonar contact, escorts that no longer wasted depth charges in wild bursts of guessing. They spoke of a new pattern, silent approach, constant contact, multiple explosions at once. Some called it a trick, some called it luck. Others, more honest, called it something worse, inevitability. A few officers tried to laugh it off, but even their laughter sounded thinner now, brittle around the edges. While the Kriegsmarine struggled to understand what happened to U-204, the Royal Navy wasted no time. The Admiralty ordered full acceleration of Hedgehog production. Factories in Glasgow, Liverpool, and Portsmouth worked day and night. Welders lit sparks beneath steel beams. Machinists carved spigots with precision. Workers packed Torpex charges into neat metal casings. In foundries where soot clung to every wall, Men hammered out mounts destined for destroyers, corvettes, and sloops that would soon leave harbor with a new crown of metal on their forecastles. These were not luxury warships, not glamorous cruisers or mighty battleships. They were the working tools of the Atlantic: Flowers, Rivers, Grimsby-class sloops, V and W destroyers, emergency escorts built by the dozen, and now each of them would carry a weapon capable of killing a submarine in seconds. Training schools across Britain changed almost overnight. Young sailors who days earlier had been sweeping decks now stood in front of chalkboards where instructors drew neat ellipses representing Hedgehog impact patterns. They learned sonar maintenance, approach angles, firing arcs, the mathematics of underwater trajectories. They drilled until their fingers bled from gripping firing levers. They practiced loading and unloading the spigots in darkness, with frozen hands on rolling decks that pitched like wild animals. And out of these tired, battered men emerged something new: escort crews who no longer feared the dark shapes beneath them quite as much as before. By early 1942, the change at sea was unmistakable. Convoys that once braced for nightly slaughter now pushed through wolfpack zones with unexpected resilience. Escorts didn't just defend anymore, they hunted. Using ASDIC contact and radar bearings, supported by new tactics developed at the Western Approaches Tactical Unit, sloops and destroyers began coordinating in ways U-boats never anticipated. One escort held contact, another moved ahead for the attack run. Hedgehog arcs landed precisely where calculations predicted the submarine would be. Depth charges still had their place, but the Hedgehog delivered the first blow, a precise, lethal jab before the sledgehammer. Merchant captains who had spent years watching ships burn on the horizon now wrote in their logs with cautious optimism: escorts unusually aggressive tonight. Enemy attack repelled before closing. New weapon appears effective. They didn't know the full details, but they could feel the difference. When U-boats attacked convoys, escorts no longer reacted with panic or confusion. They moved with choreography, calculated, rehearsed, confident. And confidence in war is as dangerous as any weapon. On the German side, confusion deepened. U-boats continued to disappear with no distress calls, no survivors, and no clear signs of what had destroyed them. The wrecks that were found were torn open along their pressure hulls, shattered by direct impact rather than concussive force. Analysts studied every detail and returned with nothing. The British were firing something forward, something accurate, something that killed before a submarine could even begin to escape. Without knowing how to counter it, the Kriegsmarine could only advise its crews to dive deeper, run quieter, evade earlier. But none of these measures changed anything. Hedgehog didn't rely on pressure waves. It relied on hitting the submarine itself, and the ocean offered no hiding place from a weapon that killed by touch. Morale among U-boat crews began to crack. Sailors arriving in Lorient or Brest spoke about escorts that no longer let go, escorts that charged straight toward them without losing contact, escorts that fired invisible weapons, creating 6 or 8 explosions at once. Some called it a trick, some called it luck. Others, more honest, called it something worse: inevitability. A few officers tried to laugh it off, but even their laughter sounded thinner now, brittle around the edges. By late 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic felt different. The Black Pit, the deadly mid-ocean gap where aircraft could not reach, began to shrink as new long-range patrol planes entered service. But the real change was on the surface, where Hedgehog-equipped escorts patrolled like wolves of their own. Corvettes that once trembled before U-boat attacks now charged toward sonar contacts at full speed. Operators kept their sets locked onto targets even as the ship surged forward, something unthinkable before Hedgehog. Mortar crews knelt at their stations, waiting for the call they now trusted more than any other: "Stand by, Hedgehog." One destroyer captain, after scoring 2 kills in a single patrol, wrote in his report, "The weapon is a revelation. The enemy cannot hide beneath us. We strike from above and ahead before the submarine can escape. The sea no longer belongs to them. His words reflected a wider truth. The psychological tide had turned. Escorts were no longer underdogs. They were becoming hunters. Some crews even began to nickname their hedgehogs: Prickle, Thumper, Bloody Mary, Old Faithful. Cartoon hedgehogs appeared on bulkheads, painted with little bombs in their paws. Men touched them for luck before going on watch. Superstitions grow quickly at sea, and now the Allies finally had something worth believing in. Yet for every celebration aboard an escort, a shadow spread across the pens in occupied France. Young German radio men wrote in their diaries about new sounds they heard on hydrophones, patterns they couldn't identify, strange harmonics, odd bursts of sonar that suggested the Allies were closing in faster than ever before. Some captains returned pale and withdrawn. Others joked loudly to hide their fear, but even their laughter carried a desperate edge. They knew something was hunting them, something precise, silent, and merciless. By late 1942, the U-boat arm, once so confident, entered the Atlantic with something it had never carried before. Not caution, not bravado, but fear. The escorts had changed, the convoys had changed, the ocean itself had changed, and every time a sonar ping echoed through the hull of a submarine, every time a shadow passed overhead, every time an engine vibration hinted at an approaching escort, the same thought crept into every man's mind: if they see us first, we are already dead.